Okay, I think it's time to get started. At least here, it's pretty late, past midnight. So this is Jari, and I am late working group because Stephen has a family issue and may join us late. So I started the call, and Stephen has posted an agenda, which we will follow. Of course, if you have comments on the agenda, we can reshuffle that. And I have turned on recording. Hopefully that's okay with everybody. Please yell if not. You just have to take some notes afterwards. Although I'll try and take also some live notes, but not that detailed level that we can do when we have the recording on. So, no comments on the agenda. So Stephen's agenda said we would do basically three things. One, do around the table status updates or introductions. Not that we need introductions per se, but if you have an update on what you've been up to recently in recent weeks, then please give us that, or have a burning thing in your mind that we have to solve this, please tell us. And then we should talk about the way forward, in particular, like how do we have lots of text and lots of people writing different things. How do we move forward and actually get something done that I think would be useful to talk about? And then what to do next in terms of meetings and so forth. So starting with the intro status updates, and I actually try and do this, call people's names, make sure that we go through everybody. You don't have to say something if you have nothing to report, but I'll just go by the order that I have on my screen. And we'll start with Colin.
Hi, Colin Perkins from the University of Glasgow. I am mostly just here to observe and see what's going on in this group.
Thank you. And Dominique, you're next.
Hi, Dominique. It's August in the UK, so most of us are on holiday. So not a lot has been done yet. But I just wanted to thank you, Jari, for the comments that I just received on the email list. I noticed you sent out a number of comments, including on your own document. So that was good, and it was really good, actually, really helpful for me. And just want to make sure that we, kind of figure out how those documents fit into moving forward, what we're going to do next. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Dominic. And then Ira.
Sorry, finding the mute. Ira McDonald, consultant in the Toyota Global Vehicle Security Team. And I'm, like Colin and some others probably, listening in to learn more about this. I've been following the mailing list and reading some of the documents as I could.
Thanks. And then Jeffrey.
Hi, this is Jeffrey Yaskin. I'm working on the privacy threat model that Sam Weiler mentioned in your last meeting, and he suggested that I pay attention to this. So I'm mostly listening and trying to read your documents.
Great, welcome. And I'll jump back to Christian. Oh wait, you may not be.
Yes,
are
sorry.
You able to speak it? Yes, you are.
Sorry, I was almost ready to get lunch, and then I realized that I had to join you. So I'm here.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry about your lunch. Yeah, so we're in sort of status report round. So if you have any particular things you want to mention, that would be a good time. Christian, you're muted if you wanted to say something.
Oh, okay. I'm Christian Wittemar. I've been following the Model T work from the beginning, and I am not spending as much time as I would like on it, but still following and trying to get there.
Okay, thanks. And then Joe S. or Joe's? Is this Joe
Yeah,
Salloway?
this is Joe Salloway. Yeah, sorry, my WebEx name is not as clear as it should be. Yeah, I have nothing new to report. Just trying to catch up on what's going on here.
All right, and then Mark.
Hi, it's Mark McFadden. I have a couple updated drafts, one on changes to the threat model, and another one that I sent to the MAP research group. It's a piece of work that does a statistical analysis of words in security consideration sections. And it's an interesting piece of work that sort of, I think, speaks to the Model T work, but kind of obliquely. So those are the two updates I have. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. The other draft, you had changes on threat model, but the other one, this wasn't. This was something else than the terminology draft. What was the file name of the draft?
Right. So there's really three drafts in play. There's one that's about the changes to the threat environment. There's one on the endpoint taxonomy draft that I did update in July. And then I was just calling to your attention, and I won't talk a lot about it, but a piece of work that a co-author and I did on taking a look at word counts in security consideration sections and seeing how they've changed since 2003. So those are the three I was talking about. Thanks, Gary.
All right, thanks. And Martin.
Martin Thompson. I've been following since the beginning. I've got a draft that I submitted. We've discussed a little bit, but nothing's happened since we last met. And unfortunately, I was sleeping when Yari sent his emails, and I haven't read them yet.
All right, and Russ.
So I've also been following this group since the beginning. I have not yet read Yari's emails from not that long ago. But otherwise, I think I'm up to date on the list, but nothing new to report.
All right, and Tommy.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so I'm Tommy C from NCSC. So I've been following this work from the beginning. I'm interested to see where it is developing from today. I'm also looking how NCSC can bring more of our work on attack defense in to build on the indicators of compromise work that we have done thus far. So I think this is very exciting.
Thanks. And Wendy.
Yes, Wendy Seltzer, W3C, following this work mostly to and working to bring it to W3C and ideas from there here, vice versa, including the work that Jeffrey is doing on threat models, and we've recently seen some new work on privacy protective features incubating in a relatively new privacy community group at W3C.
Yeah, and I can go last, but before that, did I miss anybody? I guess not. So updates. Yeah, there's been some some email updates, perhaps. So I did some reviews, and been mostly thinking about like how to move forward. And as usual with the IETF, it's maybe not so much about like adding stuff, but making sure that we actually have a sort of consistent story piece that could be published and has the necessary pieces, but not too much else. And yeah, I guess we can talk about that in a bit. And otherwise, not much on my side has happened either since the previous informal meeting during IETF 108. I've been on vacation, and yeah, now back and have to do some work. So here we are. Yeah, so maybe the next item then is what Stephen had suggested, that we talk about the way forward, and I guess his point of view was that we're heading towards two different things. One, trying to offer the IETF some text as a possible update of BCP 38, or maybe some other document too. And secondly, writing some background documents that explain the motivation for that, or maybe just the motivation, but it could also be other things like guidelines on how to deal with specific issues and so forth. But the general thrust seems to be that we would have like two separate pieces of work. One is something that we could send off to the IETF. We don't decide on these BCP changes. Obviously, it's the IETF's turf, but we could certainly send a document, or individuals could send a document and say, hey, let's look at this on the IETF side. So that's one, and the second one would be this background information, maybe a summary of facts, or summary of different kinds of issues to take into account, or something like that. And of which we have several candidates right now, several documents have in that space. So I guess the first question is whether this kind of direction from Stephen's email is a reasonable direction, like a two-pronged approach going forward. Well, if you have thoughts, please speak up. We are a small group today, so you can just speak up.
So Yari, it's Mark. I'll speak up just because there was silence there for a second. As far as the two-pronged approach goes, I actually think that's a good idea, because I think the authors of some of the drafts that talk about the threat models can sort of meet one of the goals that was in the charter, right? And that the second bullet of deliverables in the charter says that one of the things we're going to do is produce a document that takes a look at how BCP 72 either matches or doesn't match today's reality. I think we have a lot of input on that, and I think that, you know, bringing the authors together to try to come up with a common statement that then can get transmitted to the IETF is a good result, not only for Model T, but that's a good result for the IAB. I don't think we're in a position, and I would argue against offering text to the IETF at this point that is an actual update to BCP 72. I don't think we're even close to that yet. But the two-pronged approach seems reasonable to me. And the second thing I would say about it is that I think we have some documents already that, if we brought them together, edited them so that they were, let's say, a little stricter, a little more concise, I think that would be very good input to the security area in the IETF.
Okay. Other people?
Yeah, Yari, this is Dominique. I was unmuting as Mark was unmuting. I do support the two-prong approach, and similarly, I only briefly looked at your comments because you sent them about 20 minutes before, and I too was resting before the call. But basically, I think the content, we have quite a lot of content, and I think one of the comments that you had was on focusing, and I think along the same lines as Mark's comment, if we take all of that together and focus a lot of the research and the input and the information and the editing that needs to be done, that can inform the second part of it. But I think we're not quite yet at that point where we can do an update to BCP 72. But I do think we have a lot of information, and we have a lot of sort of people thinking about it. We have 7 drafts, obviously, as well, and now also the W3C is participating. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from them. But I think we're at a point where we're gathering and consolidating information in a way that reflects the current security information that can then inform the next step after that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Christian, here, please. Yeah, I mean, I think having a taxonomy of the threads is a really good idea. And I like Dominique's draft on that, because, I mean, things like botnet, phishing, network penetrations is something that we have to be concerned and that have to be out there. Too much of the threat model that we have now is focused on just addressing the direct communication between 2 points, and not looking at the network effects is a bad idea. So first, having the threat out there and say, hey, yes, this thing is happening. I mean, we have to be concerned about it. What seems to be, I mean, there are little details in Dominique's draft that I would like to see, I mean, a bit, I would say, expanded on. One is our use of network attack, which is very ambiguous in an IETF context, because network attack in an IETF context means attack on the routers, typically, and that's not what we are speaking about. We are speaking about typically an attack that culminates in something like breaching the Active Directory for the site or something like that. So it's basically attacking a community rather than attacking a piece of hardware. And so that should probably be expanded a little bit on. The other thing that I like is about the phishing part, but we should probably have a description of the relation between all that. Typically, the fact that an attack starts with a bridgehead, which is typically obtained by phishing, but can be obtained by something else, and then goes into expansion to eventually try to control the network. And that is something that is important for me, and I'm guilty there of not giving feedback early and providing text to Dominique. But we should develop that. And it goes to my second point. The reason we want to have this taxonomy of attacks is also because we want to have a taxonomy of defenses. For example, if we follow the attack model in which phishing leads to a beachhead, leads to a lateral propagation, then leads to a network compromise, and then leads to all kinds of exploitation, there are different defenses that apply at different points. And so it'd be very interesting to get from the first taxonomy of attacks a second one, which is a taxonomy of defense. But for me, that should be a second step, and I've already spoken too long, so I'll give the floor to whoever wants to speak next.
Thanks, Christian. That was really useful.
got a couple of questions, and I'm wondering if you can hear me because the setup's weird.
We can hear you.
Oh, excellent. So I think the broad spectrum of threats that we've sort of seen documented in these drafts are interesting, and the question that I have, and the question I've been struggling with, is what does the IETF do about some of these? And I think there's various contexts in which we do understand what happens, but the protocol design aspects of this are much less clear to me. And so I'm interested in a concise listing of things that we might concretely suggest as it goes to your first side of things when it comes to something like phishing and establishing a beachhead and lateral propagation and those sorts of things. I think there is work that's going on, but I haven't seen a very concise, clear summary of the actions that we might then take as a result of that. We do understand that.
But Martin, I think I agree with you, and that's the reason why I said it should be a two-stage approach. First, you list, all the threat, the big attacks that are hanging below our nose, and we absolutely have to acknowledge that. Otherwise, there's no credibility in the work. And then there will be defense against those attacks, and only a fraction of the defense is something that is in the IETF purview. But we have to do that in a two-step approach first.
I think that's reasonable. I guess the question is how far you get down the path of carefully documenting all of these various threats before you start to try to work out where it is that we have some purchase on them and where it is that we've decided that simply these are out of scope and will not deal with them. That bit is what bothers me most, I think.
So
the W3C is doing, and that's sorry, Ari, the W3C is doing the work on the privacy side of things, and that's a very different thing to what we're talking about here.
So I think you're asking really good questions. I agree with Christian that this two-step approach, if I understand his approach correctly, is probably the right answer for that. And from my own perspective, I think it's always the case that you have to understand first before you can react, or even know if you don't need to react or cannot react. So I think understanding is important, even if we might possibly not be able to do something in a particular protocol. Regardless of that, the understanding is important. Recognition of issues is important. But there's a other side of your question, which is that it's not like one thing that we're documenting. It's like a number of different things that we could be looking at, and then the question comes, which ones of those we actually want to dig in deeper. I think that's a good question to ask, and I don't necessarily have an answer. But we're not going to document everything that has changed in the internet since 20 years ago, and that would be too much. We need to select a particular subset. That's why I've been calling for this more focused approach.
That's true. At the same time, there's something that Martin said about the tension between security and privacy. But what we see in a number of those big attacks, like the attack against the Office of Budget Management in the US, is the fact that the goal of the attack is to acquire personal identification data and database on people that you can then use to break those people's privacy and also to mount further phishing attacks and things like that. So there is, the relation between security and privacy is not, in the name of security, you're going to destroy privacy. It's like also the absence of security destroys privacy.
It's Mark again. Can I sort of follow up on something else that Martin said, and that there would be sort of like if we think about Christian's two-step approach, and that the first step is this sort of taxonomy. And I think Martin, and not putting words in his mouth, but I think one of the things Martin was saying is, how far do you go, right? That you come up with a list of threats and attacks, and to what point do you have to say, look, the IETF doesn't respond to some of these, or it isn't part of their mission? And I would think that the answer to that question is the things we would only come up with the things that we thought had an impact on protocol design. So the threats and attacks that we want to highlight that give guidance to protocol designers to ensure that those protocol designers are taking those threats and risks and potentially mitigations into consideration. And that's kind of how, in answer to Martin's question, that's kind of how I draw the line. Now, I'm hand waving a bit, right? Because I'm not telling you how to do that. But in my mind, the qualitative answer is what we want to do is guide better protocol design from the point of view of security. And so anything that falls out of that criteria are things that the IETF wouldn't concern itself with.
Yeah, Mark, I think you've basically hit it there. So I was thinking originally that this would be exactly that sort of advice to protocol designers, so how to design your protocol for better security. But when you look at the text that's in BCP 38 and 3552, whatever that one is, there's a lot there that already sort of covers that aspect of it. But the thing that most sort of interests me in terms of my own blind spot, I guess, is the idea that we potentially design new protocols in response to particular privacy threats or security threats that are a result of the changing landscape. And so the work that's going on to deal with incident response, for instance, is an example of that. And so I think there's different reactions that we might have, and some of those are, this is the way that you change the way in which you design protocols to achieve other purposes, and then these are opportunities to do new work in the area that requires cooperation between different nodes.
Tommy here. I think that's right. And to just pick up on a point from Martin and Christian, I think listing and categorizing the threats is important, and I do accept that we don't really know as protocol designers what impact that should have on the protocol design, and it may be that it actually can have very little impact because there's not much that the protocol design can do about it. But I think it would be unwise to be ignorant of those threats, because it may be that the protocol design can actually have quite a lot of impact on how effective those threats can be. I mean, just taking Christian's example of establishing a bridgehead and then an attack propagating through a network that's going from one device which has become malicious to other ones moving through. That is really one which is very hard to stop with conventional protocol design considerations that we may have, but it's one I think we should be considering and studying and working out whether we can do things which frustrate that sort of example. So I don't really know answers, but I feel there is study required to determine what we should do in protocol design in response to quite a systematic survey of the threats and the things which are causing damage both security and privacy wise at the moment. So yeah, I'd support sort of continuing to look at that question of how you use knowledge of these threats to have impact on your protocol design choices.
Well, I have one more question, and that is it possible to take Christian's two-step design and do a dry run or a trial run of it on something that's relatively well understood? So to take the example that Tommy used, the lateral propagation within a network. You've got the beachhead, and you're trying to propagate across into other nodes within that network. What is it that we might do in that context, and do a deep dive on something so we can prove that is tractable, or we can prove that one is not one that we're interested in? I suspect that we are interested in it, but that's my suggestion, is maybe someone can do a little bit more of a deep analysis of one of those, and maybe we can have a discussion about that.
Yes, I think that's correct. I am not going to do that analysis now, but stating that we shall have a document going in depth on this particular attack, I mean the bridgehead problem, it's something we should definitely have a draft before the next meeting.
I just wanted to say, yeah, I'd be happy to help work on that draft. My draft on security protocol design, what I wanted to do in the next sort of iteration of it is to actually do exactly what you mentioned and what you were talking about, Martin, and that is to really look in more detail at the issues and at what is impacted, right? How the protocol design would be impacted by certain security and privacy threats as well. So it's something that I've had on my mind that I haven't done in the current iteration, but it's definitely something that I want to do. So yeah, happy to work on that.
Yeah, a possible direction forward here. And when we get in this position, sometimes with traditional working groups, one of the things we do is we go off and form an editing team to go away and try to meet the needs of multiple authors, right? And I think we could take Martin's suggestion, and if we could come up with a crisp description of what we were asking from the authors, I'm sure that we would have volunteers from the people who have been authoring drafts for Model T to attempt what Martin suggested, the sort of deep dive on a specific tractable problem, and then come back to Model T with some documentation of that comes from perhaps a consensus or unified set of the people who have been contributing documents to Model T over time. So sort of like forming an editing team, but in this case, to meet the sort of specific goal that Martin talked about. I do think we need to somehow capture fairly crisply how we're going to describe that for the editing team, but that would just be a straw proposal for moving forward.
Yes, I like that idea, actually. Now wondering a little bit if we should attempt to do a crisp definition right now for the benefit of my notes or for the recording. Christian or Martin or you, Mark, would you like to attempt to give us 2 or 3 sentences to define what we would like to do?
So I don't think we need to specify which item that we dive into. I think that maybe the bridgehead problem is the one that we get, but I would like to see a very concise description of a specific type of problem, and then examine the sorts of responses that might be taken to that problem, and then take a look at each one of those responses and say what effect that might have on someone who might choose to design a protocol, or someone who is designing a protocol for that context. I don't know that that's quite crisp enough, though.
I think I would say +1 to Martin's suggestion there. I think we could leave it to the editing team to pick what it was, the particular threat or the particular risk that they were going to do the deep dive on. I think what's more important for Model T is being clear about sort of the general outline of what we expect as output. And I agree with Jari that it could just be 2 or 3 sentences. It doesn't have to be more than that. But it needs to be crisp enough so that if we have 3 or 4 or 5 people volunteering to try to produce some work in that space, that they have a common view of what it is they're going to end up producing.
The reason I like the proposal is because it's concrete. We can start with one specific problem and then get a brainstorm about what could be done. Take the bridgehead problem. There are plenty of things we could brainstorm on. I mean, like what happens with protocols that assume that if you're on the same local network, you're authorized, and things like that. And just go in one problem, not try to over-specify it in advance, and see what it gets. It seems better than basically, Jari, you're going to write minutes. In the minutes, you can say something else, takes a problem, analyze it concretely, and look at various existing mitigation that have been studied in the IETF, look at mitigation that are deployed in the industry, and see what more the IETF could do. That seems reasonable.
Thanks. That does sound good.
This is Russ. I don't have a huge amount of time to put into this, but I would be willing to work with somebody else to help capture some of that, and certainly just make sure we have something as a straw man for the next time we get together.
Very good. Thank you, Russ. Okay, so any other things that we should be doing or any other points that people want to take up at this stage? I guess not. So why don't we move to the next item on that agenda, which was when should we meet again? And I think it would be useful for a small team to indeed get some results before the next call. But since this is a concrete problem and not a huge problem, or I mean, it can be hopefully described in a finite amount of words, then maybe that could actually happen reasonably fast. So should we ask Stephen to schedule us a call in late September? Would that be a reasonable way forward and try and get some progress before that? And then that would leave us time for the next IETF to do another round before that happens and before the deadlines are.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Yari. And I also think we can have, further discussions on the email list, at least initially, to start things off. Thanks.
Okay, any other thoughts? And I do want to remind people that we do need to, not just have some set of people do stuff, but also the rest of us have to review their results and also review the other documentation that we have and in IETF and outside IETF. We've had some discussion of those points. So there's work that remains for trying to understand where we are and comment on documents today. So it's not just sitting around and waiting for the small team to do stuff. But yeah, so team will do things. The rest of us will do things, review and comment, participate in the mailing list. And we will have a call in late September based on doodle poll results that Stephen will initiate. And anything else?
Staying
Okay,
up, Larry. Yari.
Okay. Martin, did you want to say something?
I was going to say, thank you for staying up late, Yari.
Thank you. I'm not going to think about what your time zone is and how late it is for you. Probably even worse. Okay, I think we're done. Thank you all. I will send some notes as we process the call recording and my brief notes, and we'll get a team set up to pursue this particular practical problem, and then we'll see where we go from there. Thanks all.
Thank you, Yari.
Thank you so much.